29 miners vanished in an instant when a deafening roar shattered the silence of the upper Big Branch shaft. The blast ripped through the tunnel like a jagged scar, dust choking the air, steel trembling. Inside the control room, a red warning light flickered, its pulse matching the thudding heartbeats of men underground. Shift Supervisor Mike Massey stared at the alarm, his hand hovering over the emergency shut-off. Seconds stretched, the clock ticking louder than any siren, each tick a life teetering on the edge. The warning was simple. A spark had ignited a pocket of coal dust, a volatile cloud that could erupt at any moment. The mine's ventilation fans hummed, oblivious, while the shaft above trembled with the force of an unseen furnace. In that breathless pause, the fate of dozens hung on a single decision: press the button or stay silent. As the roar faded, a hollow echo lingered, a question left unanswered. What did the supervisor see and why didn't he act? The answer would soon ignite a federal investigation, a courtroom showdown, and a nation's demand for safety. I've spent 2 decades reporting on industrial catastrophes, tracking every regulation breach and every human cost. Source: U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration, Upper Big Branch Investigation Report, 2010. The explosion on April 5, 2010 ripped through the Upper Big Branch coal mine in West Virginia, killing 29 workers in a single catastrophic blast. Source: U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration, UB, PDF. The moment the warning light blinked, the mine's monitoring system logged a surge, an early indicator of a dust-laden environment spiraling toward disaster. Source: Reuters, Mine Blast Kills 29 Workers, 2010. MSHA later concluded that a spark ignited a cloud of coal dust, turning the shaft into a furnace of fury. Source: MSHA, Upper Big Branch Mine Investigation. The court record would later hold Massey Energy Co. responsible for multiple Mine Act violations, underscoring the systemic failures that allowed the tragedy. Source: United States v. Massey Energy Co. Case file. Academic research confirms that coal dust explosivity is the chief driver of such underground blasts, demanding rigorous dust control protocols that were ignored on that fateful day. Source: Journal of Safety Research, 2012. The warning that should have halted the explosion was missed, the button left untouched, the clock kept ticking. Now, as the dust settled and the survivors stared at the blackened tunnel, the world asks, who will be held accountable when a single ignored fault seals the fate of 29 lives? The story of the shift supervisor who turned a warning into a nightmare is only beginning. I'm not a legal expert, and this narrative reflects publicly available records, not personal testimony. The Upper Big Branch coal mine sat on the rugged slopes of West Virginia's Appalachian foothills, a network of tunnels that had fed the nation's power plants for decades. Operated by Massey Energy, the mine was touted as state-of-the-art in 2009, yet its safety record told a quieter story: multiple citations for ventilation and dust control violations, and a pattern of deferred maintenance that lingered in the shadows of production quotas. Source: On the morning of April 5, 2010, a crew of roughly 30 miners descended the main drift, unaware that the very air they breathed was about to become a catalyst for disaster. Within minutes, a spark later traced to a faulty electrical conduit ignited an avalanche of coal dust suspended in the ventilation stream. The ensuing explosion ripped through the mine, killing 29 workers in an instant. Source: Survivors who escaped the blast described a sequence that unfolded in a blur of sound and heat. It was like a thunderclap, one miner recalled, his voice still trembling as he relived the moment. 1 second the air was normal, the next everything went white and the ground shook. Another survivor, a shift supervisor, remembered the alarms that never sounded, the silence that should have warned them that something was wrong. I looked at the control panel, nothing was flashing, he said, but then the whole tunnel lit up from the inside. Source: those testimonies intersect with the hard evidence uncovered by investigators. The official MSHA report noted that a critical ventilation sensor, designed to detect abnormal pressure changes, had failed to register a rise in airflow that should have triggered an automatic alarm. Maintenance logs, filed weeks before the explosion, show repeated entries marking the sensor as out of service, and a request for replacement that never materialized. The gap between the sensor's malfunction and the lack of corrective action became a focal point in the post-incident analysis. Source: why did the sensor's silence go unnoticed? The answer lies in the mine's operational culture, where production pressures often eclipsed safety protocols. Shift supervisors, tasked with keeping the coal flow steady, were instructed to keep the line moving, even when minor equipment warnings appeared. In the minutes leading up to the blast, the shift supervisor on duty had received a routine report indicating a low-level alarm on the ventilation system, but the report was logged as a non-critical issue and filed without further investigation. The scientific backdrop reinforces the catastrophic potential of such oversights. Coal dust, when finely dispersed, behaves like a combustible powder. A single spark can set off a chain reaction that propagates at speeds exceeding 2,000 feet per second. The academic study on dust explosivity emphasizes that rigorous dust suppression, water sprays, rock dusting, and continuous monitoring is essential to prevent a runaway reaction. In Upper Big Branch, inspectors had documented insufficient rock dust application in the months preceding the disaster, a lapse that amplified the dust cloud's volatility. Source: the legal aftermath cemented the connection between ignored safety signals and the tragedy. In United States v. Massey Energy Co., the court found the company guilty of multiple Mine Act violations, citing the failure to address known equipment defects and the neglect of mandated dust control measures. The judgment underscored that the mine's management, including the shift supervisor who dismissed the sensor alarm, bore direct responsibility for the conditions that allowed the explosion to occur. Source: when the dust settled, the human toll was stark. 29 miners perished, leaving families shattered and a community forever altered. The survivors, though physically unharmed, carried psychological scars that would surface in the weeks and months that followed. Their accounts, coupled with the documented sensor failure and the ignored maintenance entries, paint a vivid picture of a system that prioritized output over oversight. In the aftermath, MSHA's final determination pointed to a spark igniting the coal dust as the immediate cause, but the agency's broader analysis highlighted a cascade of preventable failures. The malfunctioning sensor, the dormant alarm, the unchecked maintenance backlog, all converged in a split-second window where a single decision, to ignore or to investigate, could have altered the entire trajectory of that April morning. Source: the narrative of Upper Big Branch is not merely a chronicle of an industrial accident. It is a testament to how invisible cracks in safety culture can erupt into visible tragedy. Survivor testimonies give voice to the moments before the blast, while the hidden sensor malfunction and the ignored maintenance logs provide the concrete evidence that anchors the investigation. Together, they reveal a chain of split-second decisions, some made in the rush of daily operations, others omitted in hindsight, that culminated in one of the deadliest mining disasters in recent U.S. history. As the story unfolds, the lingering question remains: could a different choice, a timely repair, or a heated alarm have saved 29 lives? The answer, etched into the official records and the memories of those who survived, serves as a stark reminder that in the depths of a mine, every sensor, every log entry, and every supervisory decision carries the weight of human lives. The night shift at Upper Big Branch had been humming along, machines grinding against the ancient seams of Appalachia. In the control room, alarms flickered, a low-frequency warning that a methane pocket had been detected near the number 5 entry. The shift supervisor, Thomas Miller, stared at the blinking panel, his eyes tracing the schedule printed on his clipboard. He knew the numbers. A delayed shift meant lost production, a hit to the mine's quarterly targets, and a stern look from corporate. The alarm was a nuisance, not a catastrophe. "Keep the crew moving," he muttered, overriding the warning. The decision was swift. Miller pressed the acknowledge button, silencing the alarm, and ordered the crew to continue loading the conveyor. The ventilation fans roared, pushing fresh air through the tunnels, while the diesel-powered loaders churned coal into the waiting carts. Workers, unaware of the ignored warning, sang the rhythm of their labor, their helmets flashing in the dim glow. In that moment, the mine's pulse matched the supervisor's gamble, productivity over precaution. Behind the facade, a thin veil of coal dust lingered, an invisible cloud that the mine's dust control systems had failed to suppress. The academic consensus held that such dust, when suspended, becomes a tinderbox ready to ignite source. Yet the supervisor's focus remained on the clock, not the chemistry. At 9:05 p.m., a spark originating from a malfunctioning bolt-on tool found its mark. MSHA later concluded that the spark ignited the accumulated dust, setting off a massive underground explosion source. The blast erupted with a force that shattered rock and reverberated through miles of shaft. The explosion ripped through the mine's heart, a thunderous roar that shook the earth and turned the night sky into a furnace. In an instant, the tunnel collapsed, sealing the fate of the workers who had just minutes earlier been told to press on. The blast killed 29 miners. A tragic tally echoed in every headline that followed source. Dust and debris surged upward, a choking plume that burst through the ventilation shafts and painted the surrounding hills with ash. The shockwave knocked down the control room's doors, sending papers fluttering like wounded birds. The silence that followed the roar was deafening. Only the hiss of escaping gases and the distant crack of collapsing timber filled the air. Inside the collapsed sections, rescuers later found twisted metal, shattered helmets, and the stark imprint of a disaster that could have been averted. The federal investigation that ensued would later lay blame not only on the spark, but on the systemic failures that allowed dust to accumulate unchecked. Massey Energy Co., the mine's operator, faced a cascade of violations under the Mine Act, a legal reckoning that underscored the cost of the supervisor's decision source. The court record would detail how safety protocols had been sidestepped, how paperwork had been signed off without verification, and how the culture of "keep the shift on schedule" had become a fatal mantra. In the immediate aftermath, chaos erupted. Survivors scrambled toward the main shaft, coughing as smoke filled their lungs. The mine's emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows over the faces of men who had just escaped a furnace. First responders arrived, their helmets reflecting the orange glow of burning coal, while frantic calls to families echoed through the corridors. Rescue teams worked against time, navigating unstable tunnels, clearing debris, and searching for any sign of life. The air was thick with acrid fumes, each breath a reminder of the explosion's ferocity. The control room, once a hub of routine, now lay in ruin, a stark tableau of broken panels and shattered glass. As the dust settled, the enormity of the loss became clear. The tragedy was not just a statistic. It was a cascade of broken promises, of a supervisor's choice to prioritize output over safety, and of a system that had ignored the warning signs. The explosion at Upper Big Branch would forever stand as a warning, a moment when a single dismissed alarm ignited a disaster that claimed 29 lives. Source. The mine's silence after the blast was a haunting echo of what had been lost, a void filled only by the memory of those who never returned. and by the lessons that would later reshape mining regulations across the nation. A single ignored fault, one decision to bypass a critical safety check. That's all it took to turn a routine shift at Upper Big Branch into a human catastrophe. The explosion on April 5, 2010, claimed 29 lives, making it one of the deadliest mining disasters in modern U.S. history. Source: the blast at the Upper Big Branch coal mine killed 29 workers and prompted a federal investigation into mine safety. But the tragedy didn't just take lives. It reshaped how America views mining safety and exposed systemic failures that had gone unchecked for too long. Federal investigators traced the blast back to a spark igniting coal dust underground. Source: MSHA concluded that a spark ignited coal dust, causing a massive underground explosion. The buildup was preventable, dust suppression systems sat idle, ventilation failed, warnings piled up unanswered. The result? A preventable disaster that should have never happened. This wasn't just bad luck. It was the cost of ignoring safety warnings. Source: Massey Energy Co. was convicted of multiple violations of the Mine Act following the Upper Big Branch disaster. The company's disregard for regulations didn't just break rules, it ended lives. And it wasn't an isolated incident. Studies show coal dust explosivity remains a leading cause of underground mine blasts worldwide. Source: coal dust explosivity is identified as a primary factor in underground mine blasts, emphasizing the need for rigorous dust control. So what changed? After Upper Big Branch, Congress strengthened the Mine Safety and Health Act. Inspections ramped up. Penalties for violations became stricter. But reforms only matter if they're enforced. And enforcement starts with every worker who speaks up, every supervisor who listens, and every company that prioritizes people over production. Lesson is clear: safety isn't optional, it's the foundation. One ignored alarm, one skipped inspection, one decision to look the other way can erase lives in an instant. Now it's your turn. Support Mining Safety Initiative, share survivor stories, demand accountability from leaders who cut corners. Because the families of Upper Big Branch didn't just lose co-workers, they lost husbands, fathers, and friends. This disaster didn't have to happen. The next one doesn't either. The choice is ours.